step one on this ladder to getting the league title in the remaining games that were left was taken last night. It was taken in the victory over Everton at Anfield. A deeply uncomfortable watch at times, I think you'll agree. The first half was quite painful. We looked at the likes of our unflappable leader at the back looking a bit Keystone Cops a couple of times, at least 2 occasions where he was completely done by a lad who's, at best a sort of a journeyman centre forward. The guy buried the ball once. We got a narrow offside decision, and he hit the post the other time. We got away with that one. So that was a bad start. But I think, to be fair, they came out a different team in the second half. Were you at this one, yeah?
Yeah, I was, yeah.
And so can I ask you what it felt like in the ground? We've spoken, you and I, recently about how Anfield is obviously a real weapon, but an anxious Anfield is a different beast. And I wondered, could you sense that in the first half? Because I thought, genuinely speaking, the crowd was better last night than it has been in recent occasions, where it felt like the nerves had gotten to the fans or some other thing. I thought, generally speaking, the stadium seemed very lively. What did it feel like? Did it have that feel of, is this slipping a little bit? Are we nervous? Was there a nervous feel in that first half?
Yeah, I think it's probably fair to say there was a little bit of nerves, mainly because we weren't playing well. I think the fans could see that we weren't playing well, and what's in the back of the mind of fans, isn't it? Because it's Everton, and already because where we commentate, we can hear the people behind us and going, not them again, because it's like Everton, and I think most Evertonians would agree with me that they got a way to go before you can call them a good or even a great team again. So I think that was a disappointing bit from Liverpool fans. But let me just tell you a story. When you talked before about the COVID season and we won the league and the asterisk season, as people call it. So we have a guy that, and I don't know if you're part of this, Trevor, but we have a guy that sends out all the stats before Liverpool games. And I'm not a massive stat man, but when I look at a stat, I think I can work it out, because of a relatively good memory. And he put in the stats that Everton had only led, I think, for 36 minutes at Anfield this millennium. And I looked at that and I went, so I actually went up to him and I went, that's not right, because I was there when they beat us 2-0. And I remember Richarlison scored after 3 minutes. So that must have been 87 minutes they led. He went, yeah, he said, well, I don't count games without fans. So I went, well, what about the title then? And that's he's a massive Liverpool fan. So when we can't have that, I said, they all count. So how was it last night, Trevor? First 20 minutes, it was a little, because I just thought that we're always looking for the reactions, aren't we, Trevor? That was a big thing last night at Anfield, isn't it? You're talking to people and people will go, there will be a reaction. This is now the home stretch. There will be a reaction after Wembley, and we'll come out fire and we'll push him back. We did push him back, but they were quite happy to play like that. And we played without being really able to create any sort of chances. Although I did hear people at the end of the game go, if you got to assess the game in a brutal manner, Beto hits the post and Shota scores. I don't know. I think the right team won. I think we were by far the better team.
Yeah, I think that's the overall takeaway for sure at the end of the game. It just did feel a little bit like it took a while so I think an awful lot of people were worried about, are we just segueing back into this sort of half-arsed display that we saw against Newcastle, where they just don't look themselves. But like you say, it sort of started to take hold. And one man who had been, let's be honest, a little bit of an empty shirt for quite a while was Diogo Jota. So beautiful to see that lad come up good and come up trumps in terms of a really well taken goal, which, there was a little bit of controversy around a few incidents in the game. We'll get to the big one in a second. But a lot of Everton fans were looking to see this one ruled out, which I thought was quite funny, because they don't seem to have a proper grasp on the offside rule. Now, I can understand how you might think that. Pal of mine came up to me today and said, hey, what about that offside, surely? and it's like they're not thinking about it. Were you nervous at the time that it was going to be given? Because we're going now to the refereeing side of things in a second, and it did seem, didn't it, as if that wasn't going Liverpool's way in terms of decisions. So I will admit I was a little bit nervous when they were checking it. I will admit that.
Well, Trevor, I believe that the change in the ruling came when we were desperate for more goals. And the lawmakers decided that being in an offside position is not an offence. And obviously, Diaz being in an offside position is not an offence. It's only an offence when he starts to. It's only an offence if he attempts to play the ball, if he takes the attention of the defender, so he can't play how he wants to play, isn't it? But that moment that ball is played into a new position, it becomes a whole new situation. So because of the laws of the game, I didn't think it was going to be disallowed. But because of the way that the game was being reffed, I thought it might have just about summed it up, mightn't it? If they'd have found a way to disallow that one as well.
That's where I was going with it. And I think it's important to talk about this for a sec, because it was weird to watch last night, and not in a good way. The people who are sort of given to having a moan could really find a lot of stuff to hang their hats on. There were 2 yellow card decisions which I thought were hilariously awful. The first one was for Jota, after he was being sort of manhandled with both arms in a bear hug style right in front of the linesman. So even if the referee couldn't see it, the linesman could. It went on for a few seconds, and when he didn't get a free kick, Jota displayed some impertinence and impatience, and he got a yellow card, which is quite ironic. And then later on, there was the one where Darwin Núñez picks up a yellow card, apparently for rolling back onto the field and therefore delaying the play beginning. That's what we're being given to believe. Whereas in the wind-up to that, despite the fact that the whistle had blown, he was literally kicked up in the air by England's finest there in the Everton net. And that guy has form for doing that kind of shit. And it just, if you and I are on rival teams and we're about to kick off a big game, Jan, we're both standing in the center circle, and you run up before the whistle has been blown and kick me up in the air, I think you can expect that there will be repercussions. So the whole thing about the ball not being in play or whatever is a total red herring. He got away with one there for sure. But by far the most egregious was the Tarkowski thing. I've heard people try to say, David Moyes included, in the good old days, that would have been just seen as a good tackle. And the delineator for a good tackle, remind me if I'm wrong here, but we're not that far away in age, and I recall this as, if I make contact with the ball first, anything that happens after that is fair fucking game, right? Mm. So in the old school way, yeah. But David Moyes isn't playing in the old school, and he hasn't for years. He knows how the game works now. It felt quite empty what he was saying about that. What did you make of the refereeing performance and the VAR backup in particular from Paul Tierney?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot you can say about Paul Tierney, is it? It's impossible to miss. It's impossible to miss as a red card. As I told you before, I was on commentary, and I don't want to add to that. We all have different styles when we commentate, but I don't ever feel the need to add to that right in that moment. So when the tackle happened, I let it go for 20 seconds, and then I went, I think he's going to go. And my commentator said the same, but we just couldn't see it any other way. Then when he decided, VAR decided not to take it any further and the yellow card stands, then you got to try and come up with a plausible reason why he hasn't sent him off. And then you go, well, okay, maybe VAR feels that the referee was in a good position, which he was. He's fully seen the incident and he's happy with the yellow card, and we don't feel the need to re-referee the game. Maybe that was the reason. But obviously, all the points you need in terms of it being reckless, in terms of him being out of control. I mean, once we got a little bit further in, I said, what would have happened if he'd have broke his leg? because wow, he could have easily broke his leg, couldn't he? It was a hell of a tackle. I mean, it was the type of tackle, Trevor, that I was introduced to in August 1984 when I came to England, because I'd never seen a tackle like that before mainland Europe, and I was not a fan of it. You know, I thought it was, you know, this thing that I got the ball and there was nothing you could say, was it? You know, even our own coaching staff and whatever, he got the ball in the end. You think, yeah, but bloody hell, I've never seen anything like it. You know, and we lived with that before I came, and we lived with that for another 25 years, maybe up to the turn of the millennium, isn't it? So it's some tackle, isn't it? So yeah, there could have only been one solution, which was to give him a red card. In terms of the other one, I'd obviously spotted the foul on Szoboszlai and was aware that the ball technically wasn't in play. But, you know, if that would have been a headbutt, he'd have been sent off, wouldn't he? If Pickford would have headbutted Darwin Núñez, he'd have been sent off. So I don't know what the difference is sometimes. That's why I mentioned before, what about if he'd broke his leg? Would it then have been a difference? You know, we got to be careful that we don't. The severity of the injury has nothing to do with the challenge. We got to be careful that, you know, and to be fair, I thought McAllister did really well. You know, McAllister showed what a tough South American boy he is. You know, I mean, he wanted to get up, didn't he? You know, and he didn't want to make a big deal out of it, but he was hurt. There's no doubt he was hurt. So, you know, we got to be careful that we don't always wait for somebody to break their leg or, you know, to be in a bit of blood before we can. So yeah, he was lucky again. Absolutely lucky again. He was Jordan Pickford again. He was like, it's a horrendous challenge, isn't it? You know, how do you end up with that wild swing? You know, in the modern day, I don't know how you end up swinging like that with your left leg. But I did think it was quite humorous in the end. It's always easy when you win, Trevor, isn't it? And you look back and you see Darwin Núñez rolling on the pitch. You know what I mean? Like the moment I was in, like, we're going to restart the game now. He thought, then let me get on there. And he rolled over. And obviously there wasn't a great deal wrong with him, isn't there? But yeah, there's plenty to talk about, Trevor. Plenty to talk about. I actually read a great article last week. The only sort of main European country doesn't have VAR is Sweden. They don't have any VAR in Sweden. And they were talking to loads of fans and clubs, and they said, we absolutely love it. We love that when a goal is scored, we celebrate it. You know?
Yeah.
So, you know, yeah, but it's like, yeah, but of course we do. But no, we don't, do we? You know, we don't, because everybody looks somewhere. You know, as soon as the goal is scored, everybody looks somewhere. And I even saw when Liverpool scored that goal, and you 3 or 4 Evertonian players sprinting up to the referee. Well, you know. So yeah, good on the Swedes, Trevor.
I would love a VAR holiday just so we could see what it was like again, because I get accused of being a boring old stick in the mud or whatever. Look, I'm not afraid of technology if it's applied correctly. That's the problem. It's not. There are humans applying it with their own biases, and that's the issue. That has always been the issue. It's not about the technology. So if you're a fan of AI and fan of technology, don't be getting yourself bent out of shape. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it's only as good as the people who are pushing the buttons and making the analysis based on it. I have to quiz you up on this for a second. You said when you arrived over in '84, you got introduced to the wild ways of the raucous tackling that was part of the Division 1 existence back then. And, you know, over this side of the Irish Sea, we were brought up. I celebrated a good tackle as much as I celebrated a screamer from 30 yards. I loved that. I think everyone did love it. If you could slide in and just make contact with the ball, that type of thing. But the one where you go through a lad, we all knew what that was. And there was a term for it coined by a lad who was managerial presence back in your day, Ron Atkinson. He used to call it a reducer, right? Okay. You'll be familiar with this term, right? And and again, we were all familiar with the idea of leaving a little bit on someone early on as a type of a tactic and all the rest of it. I think it's good that football has moved away from that, because that ends careers. And I suppose what I wanted to ask you was, you said you didn't like it. I mean, it must have really made you furious as a man who was brought in to literally get on the ball and make things happen, to look up and make a pass, your great strength in your game. It must have been incredibly frustrating to have little sort of yard dogs like Vinnie Jones coming at you from the side with studs up. It it's kind of the antithesis of playing football, and yet it was. People don't realize it, Jan. It was a huge part of the culture then, and it was respected as well. It was respected. Teams had a hard man who would get in the reducers, leave a bit on a lad early doors. All this kind of shit was par for the course, Jan. Sometimes we complain about how the game has evolved, but I think that is positive movement forward, isn't it? That we're not dealing with that.
No, absolutely. But I also fully understand the sort of love or respect or admiration that was for that type of a tackle, because it was a big part of the game. But I always look back and think the things that I was introduced to that I wasn't used to was violent tackling, aerial duels. Yeah, violent tackles, aerial duels. Yeah, we never headed the ball. You know, played in. No, we never, Trevor. I played in the Netherlands for 2 years, played in Denmark. We never headed the ball. And the final thing, and that's a bit of a funny thing, isn't it? I also had to get used to the enthusiasm for corners. You know, you remember the old days, the enthusiasm, we win a corner. Yeah, I remember the first time I played at home against West Ham, we won a corner in front of the cup. 25,000 people went ballistic. You know, and I'm thinking, you know, so you had to get used to all these kind of things, isn't that enthusiasm? But the thing about the violent tackling or whatever you decide to call it, it was in every game, Trevor. You know, so even when you go and play lesser teams and you're well on top and you might win 3, 4, 5-0, whatever, but that was in the game. You could never get away from that. You know, and that was the biggest thing, was to try and find a way of coping with dealing with that tackle. And you mentioned a couple there, Vinny, but they all had them, Trevor. You look through the team sheets of Birmingham in my second season when they were in the top flight. You know, brutal. You know, go to Old Trafford, Remy Moses, are people would never remember. You know, these were people who made a living out of, and that's maybe that's being disrespectful, isn't it? But that's how it felt. First and foremost, it's a bit like that guy you have in ice hockey. You know, the guy that winds everybody up, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And we had him. I've seen Ronnie Moran stand on the touchline with his little book, you know, on the touchline, and he's not there to treat anyone. He's there to get the eyes of mid-80s Steve McMahon, you know, for Macca to get the game going. You know, go on, you know. And we know exactly what that means. So 2 minutes later, Macca flies into a challenge. You know, the opposition's up in arms and the fans are buzzing on it. That's how you get a game to go. I was not a fan of it, you know, and I think everybody knows that. My teammates knows that I never ever played like that. So when people say to me, because some people never see me play, I think get mistaken by, they go, I bet you were a tough guy. I said I wasn't really. I never went looking for anything, but I did find a way of, when they came for me, to be able to stand up for myself. I never had a black book. I never, you know, never had to spill over, go, I've got to get him back. You know what I mean? I never had that. But when they came for me, I found a way eventually to deal with it, you know. So yeah, it was, but yeah, that violent tackle, Trevor, where you make sure you get the ball and then you get everything of the guy in behind the ball. You know?
It was such a throwback to those days, and even the still of it, where you could see Tarkowski's face. Oh, he's fucking loving it, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. He's gone, wowza, you know.
Yeah.
This is what I used to watch when I was a kid. You know, this is proper football, but no.
It's not really. No, it's not really.